Hello, it's Heather again. Just as a fun exercise, I thought I would go through all of the states of the United States, and you might want to follow along on a map. It'll make it easier when I reference places. This is a list. I'm just starting on the northeastern corner, going south down in kind of like lines across the United States. And I will tell you stereotype things. Some of these places I've never been to. Uh, so I am going to talk to you about whatever thing that area is known for by other states, not necessarily how locals perceive them. So this would be, like I said, your stereotypes for this state. Also, maybe if they have an accent or something like that that is distinctly different from everyone else. So starting at on the seaboard at the most northern corner, we have Maine. Maine is does have an accent. It's not common in the younger people, but older people who've been there their whole lives do have an accent. I cannot mimic it. It's um, it's not the worst accent. It's not the most difficult to comprehend, but it's also not the easiest. They have a couple words that the pronunciation is radically different. Uh, so just once you learn those couple little tweaks, you're good. The only place I've heard it, or the place that I've heard it the most, is actually in a Stephen King audiobook. And that book was called something the kid, something about the kid. But anyway, so Stephen King is from Maine. That's kind of their major claim to fame. Then, if as we go a little south and west, we get to New Hampshire. A lot of people I remember how to spell this New Hampshire. Shire, like we're on Lord of the Rings and going to the Shire. But New Hampshire, that one's not really famous for much other than being lumped in with Vermont as like maple syrup capital. Both of these places, it's kind of a joke that maple syrup is the equivalent of money. People will trade you a gallon of maple syrup for whatever, fixing their car or something. And then next door, Vermont. Vermont recently rocketed into the limelight with Senator Bernie Sanders and his fight to get the Democratic nomination for president. Again, there is a slight accent in these places, but you'll typically only see it in older folks who've lived there their entire lives. Massachusetts. Massachusetts, we start getting into your traditionally New England states. Technically, these are, but they're kind of up in the corner, and most people think of them as their own, as a separate category. Whereas Massachusetts, we start getting into the traditionally louder people. No one except people from Massachusetts can spell this, so don't feel bad if you don't know how to spell this. I had to look it up. I have no idea. Massachusetts, so one of the slang terms that you will occasionally hear is people will call them mass holes, which is play on asshole, with the idea being that these people are obnoxious. They're not. They're fine. They're just a bit more vocal in their opinions, which to some people is offensive. They don't think so. So if someone from Massachusetts tells you exactly what they think and doesn't sugarcoat it, don't be offended. They're just being honest. Then tucked underneath that, we have the smallest state is Rhode Island. That's pretty much what it's known for, is being the smallest state. That's about it. Connecticut, next to Rhode Island, also part of that New England group. So they think they're awesome, and the rest of the United States just kind of rolls their eyes at them. New York. New York is super famous because of New York City, but the people from New York City are very proud of being from the city, and then the rest of the state pretends they're not related to each other. So if talking to someone from New York, what you'll want to find out quite quickly is, are they from urban New York or are they from everywhere else? Because they don't like to be associated with each other. New Jersey. New Jersey is famous for unfortunate things like the reality TV show Tragedy. People from New Jersey, not that bad, but again, vocal in their opinions. Pennsylvania, named for William Penn, the founder of the first colony. That is where we have Hershey, Pennsylvania. So that's the origin of the chocolate. Not really, kind of random to have Pennsylvania be a place known for chocolate, but we'll go with it. Delaware, again, a small state, not real famous for anything specific. There is also a Delaware River that was important during the American, during the early wars, the Revolutionary War, where the United States decided they didn't want to be part of the England posse anymore. So Delaware is a state and a river, so you'll hear about them, don't confuse them. Maryland, again, just New England, sure. Famous for crabs, blue crabs, crab cakes. If you hear someone talk about crab cakes, they're probably referencing the Maryland-style crab cake. There's also a Maryland-style clam chowder that is tomato-based instead of cream-based. New England clam chowder is cream-based. Maryland clam chowder is tomato-based. Also, kind of in this area is Washington, D.C. Technically not a state. It doesn't even have its own representation, but that's where all of the politicians go. There are people that live there, and there's argument about whether they're actually represented in Congress or not. It's weird because they kind of set it off as its own thing. So we've got Washington, D.C., and people will use that to differentiate it from Washington, the state. So D.C. stands for District of Columbia. Again, it's separate, and there's some weird technicalities. So if someone's talking about Washington as a place, normally in context, you can figure out if it's Washington, the District of Columbia, or Washington State. They're on opposite ends of the country, and they have very different sets of politics. Now, heading a little bit west and south, West Virginia. Not to be confused with just Virginia. Virginia was named after Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen. And then during the Civil War, Virginia sided with the South to secede and maintain slavery. West Virginia did not want to maintain slavery. So during the Civil War, West Virginia split off from Virginia. So Virginia used to be much bigger than it is today because West Virginia maintained itself as an independent state after the Civil War was over. Further down, North Carolina, South Carolina, about Virginia, and often West Virginia is kind of considered the beginning of the South. West Virginia, not so much because it split off during the Civil War, but Virginia is definitely where the South begins. And that's when you start seeing a Southern accent. Virginia's is very light. It's actually one of my favorites as far as the Southern accents go. They draw out their vowels a little more, but it's just enough to be noticeable, not enough to cause communication difficulties with someone who's not a native English speaker. So Virginia, one of my favorite words is July, the month July, they will kind of draw out into July. So you start getting a little bit of that southern accent. North Carolina, definitely southern accent. North Carolina has Myrtle Beach and spans from the coast all the way into the mountains. So it's got a nice, the state itself has a lot of really pretty things. South Carolina, you definitely are in southern country now. There's no question. And they have the long drawn out accent, South Carolina, and their barbecue is mustard based, which I think is better. Shh, don't tell any of the other states, they'll be offended. Georgia was the area of the first southern colony, named after King George. Strong southern accent. Has Atlanta in it, which is a major transition point if you're doing planes travel in and out of the United States. And then on the very southern tip, we have Florida. Florida technically is the South because it is surrounded by southern states, but Florida culturally is considered its own thing. Only, I think it's maybe 1 in 4 people who live in Florida are from Florida. There are very few native Floridians. Most of the people that live there have moved there from somewhere else in the Northeast or Midwest. Florida has a very, very, very faint accent that you only see in the native-born people. Otherwise, the accent is whatever wherever the person came from. So the Florida accent is a little nasally, but most people won't notice unless you're really looking for it. Then we go back up north into the Midwest. So Michigan is a state. Michigan is also a lake, one of the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan. Again, don't confuse the two. They are right next to each other, so figure out if someone's talking about land or lake. Michigan is also a little weird. It has a separated piece of land that belongs to the state on the other side of the lake. So people differentiate. Michigan is that mitten, and then the UP stands for Upper Peninsula Michigan, which, again, they kind of pretend they're not related, but they are. Moving south, we have Ohio. Ohio has Cincinnati. They've got a cool roller coaster park there. Ohio is also a river. So again, someone's talking about Ohio, they mean a state. If they talk about the Ohio, they mean a river. Next door is Indiana, my home state. Indiana has the Indy 500 at Purdue University, and we grow a lot of corn. Yeehaw. People in southern Indiana like to pretend they're from the South. They're not. I don't know why. It's strange. Kentucky. Kentucky is arguably the beginning of the South in this area. They do have a very strong accent. Kentucky stayed in the Union during the Civil War, but they were a slave state. So they kind of hedged their bets both ways. Slavery was not a significant impact in the economy, so it didn't really matter as much to them. Now, when you get to Kentucky, you will hear people say, everyone else pronounces it Kentucky. People from that area call it Kentucky. You will also hear Louisville, which is one of the larger cities in Kentucky. However, people from Louisville pronounce it Louisville. So if someone's talking about Louisville, you know they're native Kentuckian. If they're talking about Louisville, they are not from Kentucky. Down to Tennessee. Tennessee is very, very pretty on the eastern side. I definitely recommend everyone get to the Smoky Mountains if you're in that area. They have a very long, drawn-out accent. Probably one of the easier Southern accents to understand, simply because they don't do any guttural or back mouth talking. They just draw out their vowels. So Tennessee becomes Tennessee. So that cute little drawn-out accent doesn't trip up as many people as some of the other ones. Alabama is difficult to understand, even for natives. Alabama will turn this into Alabama. Think Elvis Presley when you think of the Alabama accent. Mississippi is a state and a river. Don't confuse the two. Deep South, very southern. So in this area, you start to get into Cajun country in the Gulf part, and then pop back up north again to Minnesota. Minnesota and Wisconsin both have an accent called Yooper, which is a play on upper. So it's the upper accent, Yooper. A lot of this area will have it. So Minnesota becomes Minnesota, and Wisconsin becomes Wisconsin. The Yooper accent rounds out vowels. So it's the opposite of the Southern accent. The Southern accent draws them out flat. The Yooper accent makes them more rounded. So instead of boat, we get boat. Instead of shoes, we get shoes. Instead of bag, we get bag. So it's, like I said, it's more round. Ghost, ghost. So you can see, again, people don't have a problem with this as much. It's just slightly different than what you may have been taught. And getting down to Iowa. Iowa, literally no one thinks about Iowa. No one knows what's up with Iowa. It's out there. Most people can't even pick it out on a map. It's kind of a boring state. Illinois. Illinois has Chicago in it. That is it's the third largest city in the United States, and it's the largest port in the center of the United States. So Illinois is a French word back when the French and Indians had a strong alliance in the Midwest. You can piss off people from Illinois if you call it Illinois. That'll make them angry. But that's how I remember how to spell it. In my head, I say Illinois, and I can spell it right. Just don't say it out loud. Again, Chicago. Chicago does have an accent kind of itself. Nowhere in the rest of the state does that. So Chicago, pronounce it Chicago. And their local football team is the Bears, which they call Da Bears. I don't know. Then we get down into Missouri. Again, you can, this one's a little different. The local people, typically older, more rural, call it Missouri. No one else calls it that. If someone calls it Missouri, they're definitely from there. And they're probably not from a large city. Arkansas, home to President Bill Clinton. That's about what it's known for. Again, you can make people from here very, very angry if you call it Arkansas. It's Arkansas. Don't call it Arkansas. You'll make them angry. Louisiana. This is hardcore deep south. We got Cajun country down here. No one understands those people. The French don't. The English-speaking don't. The natives don't. No one has any idea what these people are saying. If someone down in Louisiana is speaking to you and you haven't the slightest idea what they're saying at all, and you're pretty sure it's not even English, they're Cajun. Cajun is a mashup of French and English and Creole and some native languages. It's a pidgin that very few people speak. and their accent is such that it sounds like they've shoved 8 marshmallows in their mouth and are trying to speak to you. Again, this is one I cannot mimic because it's insane. Heading back north again, we've got North Dakota, South Dakota. South Dakota has a booming electronics and IT related industry, kind of a random pop-up recent. We've also had some native peoples are protesting in the Dakota right now over a oil pipeline that they want to build through the area, and if it busts open, would poison the water for the Native Americans. So that's in the news currently. Nebraska, they grow corn. Kansas, they also grow corn. These are kind of states that most people drive through to get to other places. Kansas is famous for your Wizard of Oz. I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. Oklahoma, they got tornadoes. Texas was its own country until it opted to join the United States. It was Mexico, then it was its own thing, then it's part of the United States. There's talk recently about them leaving the United States and being their own country again. It's huge. There are lots of vast, empty, open spaces in Texas. The locals call it Texas. And there's a lot of Texas jokes. Everything's bigger in Texas. Montana, we're back north again. Montana, large state, not a lot of people live there. Again, vast open spaces. That's about what it's known for. Wyoming, known for having the smallest population of any state in the U.S. Colorado has been popular recently because they legalized recreational marijuana. So Colorado's taxing of that has given them a huge surplus, and everyone's happy. Colorado is a beautiful state, and it is the point where lots of different kinds of the regions, the flora and fauna, all comes together. Colorado is a square, so I always tell people, you fly in, and then just drive a loop around it, because you'll have the prairie on one side, you've got the Rocky Mountains on the other, the top you get into big sky country, and then in the south is your traditional Southwest. So all of those come together in this state, so you can do the one state and see all those different kinds of areas. New Mexico, not Texas. Heading north, Idaho, famous for potatoes. That's about it. And the joke, Idaho? No, Idaho. Utah, they got Salt Lake City and Mormons. Nevada has Las Vegas, and you don't really want to go there. It's just a giant desert. Arizona, they make iced tea. Arizona has been having lots of immigration issues that have made the news because they're taking radical steps in all kinds of crazy directions. Back up north, now we are on the West Coast. The West Coast is kind of considered its own thing the same way New England is compared to the rest of the United States. So we start in the north with Washington, the state, again, not to be confused with Washington, D.C. Oregon, that's another pretty cool place that I think is underrated currently. Very, very pretty. California, most people have heard of California. It's huge, and it is the most populous state in the U.S. Then we have our weirdo ones at the end. Alaska, not physically attached to the rest of the United States. Canada is in the way. You got it from a deal. Alaska has a very small population despite how big it is, just because it's too freaking cold. And Hawaii. Hawaii, again, not physically attached, but at least it's a straight line out into the ocean, and there's no countries between us and them. Kind of weird. Hometown to our current president, Obama. And again, people from here, they have an accent. They kind of talk like they keep their mouth open. I can't mimic it, but it's very an open sound in the back. And also, Hawaii, everyone else says Hawaii. People from Hawaii, um, I always hear say Hawaii. There's an accent in there to separate, to indicate that like upwards Hawaii thing. Of course, some people from there would argue, no, that's not a thing. I don't know that many people from Hawaii, and the ones that I do all say that. So those are 50 states and Washington, D.C. I hope you had a fun time with my stereotypes.